later.
No problem. Okay, so I'm going to assume you can see my screen now.
Yep, everything looks good.
Great. So again, hello everyone, and thanks for being here today. My name is Tina Beach, and I'm Head of Resource Sharing and Delivery Services at IUPUI University Library. And what I want to do today is start with kind of an overview of open access just to make sure we're all on the same page about that. And then I'm going to go out and do some kind of live demos of resources that I think are useful for locating open access resources that you can use to fill interlibrary loan requests from your patrons. So first off, I always like to, if I'm going to use acronyms, abbreviations, that sort of thing, to define those for you. So I will frequently probably fall into referring to OA, which of course equals open access. So that's my shorthand explanation. And so we'll swing right into an overview of OA. So first off, what is open access literature? Peter Suber, who is originally from Earlham College in Indiana and is now at the Berkman Center for Internet and Society, as well as involved with a lot of other things regarding open access, has created kind of this basic definition of things that are digital, online, free of charge, and free of most copyright and licensing restrictions. So that's a really basic definition that we're going to use today. And a lot of the times when people think about OA, open access, they're thinking strictly of journal literature. But with this really basic definition, there's a lot more that kind of falls into the OA bucket than just journal articles. And we'll take a look at some of that today. But first I want to talk about open access models around kind of that journal publishing and encompassing some other formats as well. There's this green-gold distinction that's really about the venue or delivery vehicle for the content rather than any sort of degree of openness or the rights associated with the models. So I want to start by talking about gold OA, which is open access publishing. So those actual open access journals where things come out originally open access. We're talking about peer-reviewed journal articles that come from some sort of publisher, whether that be a traditional kind of large commercial publisher or a society or even a university. And the business model is one in which the publication costs are subsidized in some way. And that could come from membership fees in the case of societies, author fees, grant funding, or institutional support. Some general examples of gold open access include the Journal of Digital Humanities that you see kind of screen capped here on the screen. And then the Directory of Open Access Journals is a portal where you can search for all sorts of open access journals and find that content directly. So that's a good resource for that as well. And here's a few more examples of gold open access journals that are hosted by universities, a couple that are from my institution, IUPUI, Advances in Social Work and Indiana Libraries, and then a couple of others that are hosted at Purdue University. And open access really kind of opens the door to the publication of research that may not traditionally have reached a wide audience. So the Journal of Purdue undergraduate research, undergraduates get the opportunity to be published in this environment more so than they may have in a more traditional model. The second model I want to talk about is green open access, which really refers to author self-archiving. So open access repositories, often institutional, where authors can put their work. So in this case, the content is not necessarily peer-reviewed. It's not required to be peer-reviewed to be included in an open access repository, but those open access repositories may contain journal articles and other things that went through a peer review process prior to publication. You just have to be careful, though, because the version that gets archived by the author may not be the version that went through that peer review process. Depending on the journal especially, they may not allow the author to archive that kind of peer-reviewed version. It may have to be the manuscript that the author first submitted. So you just want to be kind of cognizant of that as you're searching in these repositories and think about the needs of your particular patron. Authors self-archive obviously much more than just journal articles. It could be conference presentations, other gray literature like reports, and other things of that nature, theses, dissertations, all sorts of things. Open access repositories are typically institutional or subject-based. So institutional is the university has a repository where they are encouraging their faculty, staff, students to archive their work, or it could be a lab or research center that's either part of or independent of a university. And then the subject-based, of course, is built around the discipline, and we'll take a look at a couple of examples of that here momentarily. And finally, there's no cost to the author for inclusion in a repository. So here are a few examples of institutional repositories, including my own. I should have pulled out some Illinois examples for you. Sorry, these are still Indiana-centric. But I'm sure you have many institutions in Illinois that have institutional repositories as well. And here are a couple examples of subject repositories. Archive.org, which I believe is the earliest of all the subject repositories, originally built around the physics scholarly community. It's expanded to include other kind of related fields, and this has been around for quite some time. So we have archive.org, and other disciplines have adopted kind of the archive.org framework for their repositories. So you might see other things that have that kind of archive.org in them but are specific to other subjects. And then SSRN is a social science research network, which is a very broad subject repository. You can see just a glimpse of some of the subjects that fall, of course, under the broad category of social sciences that are included in this repository. And then finally, we're seeing increasingly a hybrid model of open access publishing in which traditional publishers are offering the opportunity to authors to publish their specific article as open access within a journal that is traditionally subscription-based. And this typically requires a fee from the author. And this, I think, is where you see some predatory journals kind of entering the mix, trying to get authors to pay to get their articles be open access, but they're also completely legitimate publishers that are using this model as a way to replace that kind of subscription fee model, or supplement it, I guess, would be a more accurate description. I have some examples here of the fees that are charged by some publishers for this opportunity. So you can see they range quite extensively and can be quite pricey in some cases. One of the things that I found most interesting when I was updating this about 6 months or so ago is that in addition to allowing an article to be published open access for a fee, some of these publishers are now charging an extra fee for the author to not only have it be open access, but then an additional fee for it to have a Creative Commons license. And if you don't know much about Creative Commons licenses, I would encourage you to go to creativecommons.org and learn more about that. But I just find that interesting that they found that way to have an extra fee associated with open access. Publishers are starting to highlight their open access content. This Elsevier is an example of a publisher who mixes this kind of subscription and OA within a single journal, and you'll see that on the journal page it lists that they have open access, open archive articles, and you can see this open access indicator in the kind of brief results list, but what can be problematic for ILL practitioners especially is if you go directly to the article page, there's no indication that this is open access, but you are able to download the PDF. So you may start to question yourself of, well, do we have the subscription to this that I didn't realize we had? Why do I have access to this article? Is this a mistake? Am I going to get in trouble if I deliver this? That sort of thing. So sometimes you might have to work your way back to see, oh, it's an open access article. That's why I have access to it, and I can give this to my user. So I think I'm not quite sure why they haven't integrated that into the actual article page, but just to be aware of that may solve some of the questions you have about why you have access to some things. And then Springer has actually launched kind of a subset suite of journals that are open access journals. So there's the hybrid model could be open access content in a subscription journal, or it could be that a publisher offers both subscription and OA journals. So those are examples. So those are the three basic models that you'll hear about as you hear open access discussed kind of in the literature. Which, of course, means that we now have all these different pathways that we could be following, and they all come with different pathways of discovery that can keep us on our toes. So we're all over the place now. And I want to point you in the direction of some of the online resources that I think are most useful for locating open access resources. And I will say that this will expand outside of just journal articles because I'm going by this really basic definition, which you could possibly even extend to public domain materials, right? Because they're out of copyright, so this stuff does apply. So some of the things that I will talk about will also be kind of public domain resources in addition to just open access. And I will say that many of the sites I'm about to describe contain content that can be discovered through a Google Scholar search, but in some cases it may be necessary to go directly to the site. So it's good to be aware of that these sites exist, especially because how discoverable a given site's content is really dependent on the metadata quality and compatibility with Google's kind of web crawlers and how cluttered the search might be based on your title. So it's helpful to be aware of those best sites to search directly to ensure that you locate what you need. So I'm first going to talk about gray literature, specifically theses and dissertations, conference papers, and reports. And it's at this point that I am going to flip out and start doing some little example searches here for you. And I think I'm going to try and make this a little bigger in case you have trouble seeing that. So ProQuest, I'm sure many of you maybe have access to ProQuest Dissertations and Theses, the subscription database, and they also now have PQDT Open because they are offering graduate students the option to make their theses and dissertations, or ETDs, electronic theses and dissertations, available open access for a fee of $95. So if you work in an academic setting, I'm not quite sure what the split is here today, but if you are involved with kind of the publishing of your graduate students, I would actually, don't tell ProQuest I said this, but I would encourage you, if you have an institutional repository, to tell your graduate students that they could just put it there for free and not pay the $95 to ProQuest to make their ETD open access. So these ETDs that the authors pay to have become part of PQDT Open will also show up in the regular ProQuest database and be noted as open access. So if you do have access to the subscription database, you could just go directly there, but you can also search here. And I'll just do a quick search. And you can see right away that that's there. And it looks very similar. You've got that yellow banding that you normally see, but this is the open version. If you go to, I was going to show you how this looks in the subscription database in case you have access to that. So if I look for the same thing here, once I click into this, you'll see a little box over here on the right-hand side of my screen that says that this graduate work has been published as open access. So that's kind of how they denote these things, that the author has paid to appear open access and that you would be able to access through PQDT Open in their subscription database. And you can learn more if you want, but that's just, I wanted you to be able to see how that appears in here. The next piece that I wanted to show you is the ndltd.org search interface, and I must admit I always, I have it written down. It's the Networked Digital Library of Theses and Dissertations, and what they do is try to kind of aggregate from many institutions ETDs across the world. So there are member institutions and consortia that contribute their metadata to this union catalog to create a resource. And you can see they've got almost 5 million now here, so that is a very large amount of theses and dissertations for you. And this is kind of what the search interface looks like. You can limit by language. You know, this is the sort of thing we're used to seeing in libraries. And it gives you a pretty big description in some cases, and then links you out to the host institution. So if I clicked on this, I would end up, I think, at McGill University, or maybe, yes, at McGill University's institutional repository. So the NDLDT doesn't actually host the files themselves. It's a metadata aggregator, and then it sends you out to the host to get the item. So if you're looking for non-US ETDs, that could be a good place to start. And some of these, you know, it'll just depend on which search interface you kind of find most useful or user-friendly. The next resource, still talking about ETDs primarily, is Dart Europe, and this is a compilation of libraries and library consortia throughout Europe that have partnered to improve access to European theses and dissertations. And they are also connected to NDLTD. They're kind of the European part of that group. So you can search more than 700,000 now ETDs from over 600 universities in Europe and find those things. And the records that you retrieve here, again, take you back to that home institutions portal. Just to kind of give you an idea of what this one looks like. You click in, and the link here is right at the top. You can go to the record in that institution's repository, or in this case, they give you a link direct to the PDF as well if you don't want to go to the record in Université Paris-Sud's repository. Another great resource within the UK is Ethos, the British Library's e-theses online service. And they're up to more than 450,000 theses that you can search. And this is a really great resource as well because not only do they provide access to ETDs that they themselves have digitized, but it also refers you out to institutional repositories within the UK where the file might be housed there. And it also just has like catalog records where you can request that something be digitized. So that's one of the goals of this project as well, is to increase the amount that is digitized. And there is a fee associated with the digitization. So if you find something, you would have to pay a fee for the original digitization. But then after that, it's free for anyone, and you can download it as many times as you want in order to see it. And you can see there's different icons here. So this has a little open access lock here, which is kind of a little bit deceiving or confusing. It means that it might be available to download from the institution. So typically that just means open access, but everything in here is really open access. But that little lock means that this is going to refer us out potentially to the institutional repository, so you could access it through the institution. Or if I logged in with my free account, I could download it straight from here. I'm not going to take the time to log in at the moment, but you get the idea. And then if there isn't that little lock, that means that it's available through Ethos with that PDF icon. And then this doesn't have anything, so this is one of those where I could either contact the institution that ETD comes out of, or in other cases, depending on the participation level of the university. So the other one was Cambridge, them I would have to contact directly, but University of Kent, I could order the digitization to happen from Ethos right here if I logged in, but I'm not going to take the time to do that, as I said. So a way to get things to encourage and to increase the amount that is available via open access by using Ethos. Theses Canada is basically the source for open access ETDs from Canada. It's a service of the Library and Archives Canada, so you can still get this stuff even though Library and Archives Canada themselves don't participate in interlibrary loan anymore, unfortunately, but we can get at the stuff that they have, the digitized open access. So the data index comes from Canadian universities participating in their ETD harvesting program and from ProQuest. There are more than 60 universities that now participate in this program, and the years of coverage kind of vary depending on the university, but they actually have digitized theses and dissertations dating as far back as 1950, and you'll find most of what's been written since 1998 available here. And the PDF versions are available straight from the Theses Canada records. And I just want to show you, there's a little quirk to this one too. So I'm going to do a sample search here so you can see. Oops, hold back. didn't do what I wanted it to do. Let's do any. Oh, maybe they've cleaned up their records since I just tested this last week. um, yeah, okay, so this is not going to work for me today, but maybe they've fixed this kind of quirk. It used to be when you, and I can actually, let's flip to show you what I mean here. Fast forward. So you can see here, oh, that's why, because I put in the first name. So you'll see this first record here, different menu notes, has all these PDF icons, full text, blah, 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 right here in this piece. And the second one, you're like, oh no, it doesn't have a PDF icon. I must not be able to get it. And let me, now that I've figured out what I did wrong, let me do this so you can see it live. Here we go. So you see, oh, this one is definitely a PDF. And it's available, the link's right there, et cetera, et cetera. But the second one, it appears that there is no PDF, but it's because they also have this one in microform. So you see the microform piece right here. This one was only an electronic resource. This one is also in microform, so you don't see that. But when you click into the record, there is a link to the PDF right at the top. So if they do have an electronic version of a thesis or dissertation, this link will appear right at the top. You don't have to like go ferreting down through the record. It's going to be right there. But don't think that just because there aren't a billion little PDF icons in your search results that that means it doesn't exist. Actually click into the record and see if it's there. Conference papers and reports, so a lot, you probably see a lot of things coming up as being on academia.edu or ResearchGate. I'm not going to actually do sample searches because these are very basic searches here. And conference papers and reports are kind of a safe thing, I think, to get off of academia.edu and ResearchGate. There's typically, especially for kind of conference papers and conference presentations, there's less chance that an author has signed away their copyright without realizing it, and so they wouldn't be violating any copyright by sharing it, and you wouldn't be by kind of picking it up off of here. So these can be a good way to find conference presentations. The other resource that I find useful for conference papers and presentations is All Academic. Unfortunately, this isn't quite as good as it used to be. They've kind of redesigned the site a bit, and it's a little harder to find as much as you used to, but there are still things that show up in here if you are at your wit's end to kind of look for. So, I think it's because I was, yeah. All right, let me start over on this website. It timed out because I let it sit too long. Let's try again. I swear I just tested all of these searches last week, so sorry, apologies. I'm going to try, oh, I have exceeded its limits. All right, they must be having some sort of little attack thing going on, but sometimes you will be able to find, especially kind of in the social sciences, criminal justice, psychology, sociology, that sort of thing. A lot of those associations use this as their conference platform, and so you'll be able to find papers and presentations there for that. All right, moving on. So many libraries have access to the ERIC database through EBSCO, but it's a freely available resource of education materials as well. So you can go directly to this free ERIC interface and search there as well. It's a curated subject repository that contains both ERIC journal articles, which typically that half of it you don't find as being available full text. Those are just abstracts that you can then try and locate the journal article. And then ERIC documents, which typically are open access, and you may or may not know, several years ago, ERIC was forced to remove all of its full-text documents due to permissions questions, but much of that content has now been restored. So if this used to be a go-to for you and then that happened, you can start heading back to ERIC because a lot of that is back again, but you still may run across items with a kind of a notice that says PDF release pending or PDF restoration pending, so you may still run across some things that are missing, but there is a lot that is here. And there are some conferences that deposit their proceedings here as well. For instance, the Brick and Click Libraries, Academic Library Symposium, they put every year their conference proceedings in here, so all that's available. In this particular instance, it's one document, so if you know that there's a paper that one of your users is asking for or that you want to see is from Brick and Click, you would not search specifically for the paper, but for that, for Brick and Click. So just as an example here. Next, I want to talk a little bit about government documents. And the Government Publishing Office has a couple of things going on. So the current digital repository of GovDocs is FDsys. So you can search in here and find government documents related to whatever, or you can kind of also browse through the different types of documents, congressional record, bills, etc. And you'll see this is kind of very small and with narrowing your search on the side, and you can kind of go through and figure out what you need. They also have in beta this new GovInfo site, so trying to, I think, make themselves look a little more modern in their search interface. If we do the same search here, that text is way easier to read. You can get it, details, PDF, the text, you can share it. As this moves out of beta, this is probably the more user-friendly interface to start using, and you can browse in different ways. You can drill down into categories or committees or look for specific authors, etc. And then, you know, they still have kind of these categories of congressional record, etc. down here. And if as I'm going along you have any questions about one of these specific sites or even have suggestions of related sites, you can feel free to pop those in the questions as we go along. One source that I use pretty frequently, and that could just be because of the nature of my institution, but it's NCJRS, the National Criminal Justice Reference Service. And you can search their library, and they provide access to more than 220,000 collection records, and they have more than 60,000 online resources, including everything that comes out of the Office of Justice Programs. So you can go into their library, and a lot of what they have, you have to order then from them, but you can also find things that are already available digitized. Now I'll show you kind of how those look side by side. So you can see right here, quite a few of the initial things have the PDF right here, so I can download those, whereas others, as I get into it, it's just the abstract, and I would have to go and order that through Interlibrary alone, which they have directions on how to request copies from them. And unfortunately, they do actually photocopy it and send you a photocopy. I got one last week that you then have to trust your user to pick up or scan for them. So that's just kind of how that looks side by side in a results list between things that you can get right away and things you can't. Okay, next I want to move into international publications. That seems to always be another area where people have difficulty getting physical resources, so being able to find them open access is really helpful. BASE, the Bielefeld Academic Search Engine, is hosted by a university library in Germany, and they have so much content in here. So they're now over more than 108 million documents from more than 5,000 sources. So this grows constantly. I just updated kind of my notes recently, and they were just over 90 million about a month ago. So this is growing like crazy. And you can search for resources in here. And it takes you out to where the thing lives primarily. You can also do advanced searches if you're looking for a particular type of document. You can see here they have all sorts of things, books, journals and newspaper articles. They even have some scores and maps and audio things, image and video, and they also track theses and dissertations. So there's all sorts of materials in here that you can find. And you can check for non-open access things too, but primarily everything is open access. Some of you might be familiar with DPLA, the Digital Public Library of America, that's working to digitize library collections across the United States, and it's modeled on Europeana, so very similar, and they have a lot of information from libraries and museums and archives and even galleries from around Europe. And the records in here also refer you out to the owning institution's site to view kind of the full-size images and full context for the piece. So if we search for the Eiffel Tower, you can see you're expecting it all to come from France, but there's stuff from all over the place, not just France. That is about Oh, okay, good. I just saw a note that somebody lost audio, but it looks like it's back now, so I'm glad to hear that. So, you know, you get the kind of thumbnail. If you've played around in DPLA, this is very similar. You see the thumbnail. You can see a little more information in the record here, but otherwise it's going to take you out to the home institution. And it has obviously an English interface, so that's good for us. The next resource that I wanted to show that's related to international resources is Trove from the National Library of Australia. And it'll show you not only things that are freely available, but you can also see who owns things in Australia. This is really great because they have a large portion of digitized newspapers. So if you work in ILL, you know newspapers are sometimes hard to get a hold of, especially non-US newspapers. So this is a great resource in terms of that. And I thought it was really interesting when I was messing around trying to do sample searches that they have more than just Australian materials too, right? So they have a bunch of stuff about the Indiana Colonization Society, which I thought was really very interesting. So not that you would ever think to go to Trove to search for that, but just know that they do have more than just things about Australia. But that Australian newspaper piece is probably one of the most beneficial pieces of this. Canada also has kind of this discovery portal for digital collections, searching digital collections from their institutions across the country, including some serials. And of course they have both English language and French language pieces, so I can look at the issues that they have of this particular periodical and view those. So for historical materials related to Canada, this is very useful. And then the Bibliothèque Nationale de France has Gallica. It's the search portal for their digital collections, and they also index the collections of other institutions that BNF feels are contemporary to its own, including the Library of Congress's France and America collection. So those non-BNF records typically refer you out to the owning institution's site for viewing, like a lot of these do, but this kind of centralizes historical French collections. So it can be really useful. We have one particular history professor here at my institution who does a lot of work on French history, and this is a constant resource for us in trying to locate his requests. And the original interface, they first launched this in 1997, and I believe they've very recently gone through kind of an update to this interface because when I went to do my kind of sample searches, I realized that this looks very different than it did. And their little language button still isn't working from when it wasn't working last week, at least not in my browser. But that's okay with me. But typically you are able to see to translate into English. But you can then see the types of documents. You can see they have quite old pieces in here. I'm getting back into the 1800s with the search I did, but some of the stuff is even older. So we have we can click into one of these. You can kind of, once you get into one, you can kind of page through to see if it's what you need, and you can print out the PDF, etc. Or just refer your user to this to kind of do their research if they're needing to review a lot of documents related to this. And then the Spanish National Library has also a digital collections interface. I have not used this as much, but I wanted to kind of pair this with the French. But you can search for things here, and you can see even in the search box they have all sorts of things available. I did consult with one of my resource sharing colleagues who is actually pursuing her master's in Spanish, and she said that this is not nearly as good as Gallica. But if you are looking for Spanish, particularly Spain resources, this could be an option for you. If you have somebody doing literary research, they have lots of information on Don Quixote, quite a bit of digitized content there. There are also international subject repositories and kind of open access journal hosts that may be helpful. I occasionally find articles that have been requested by our users coming through these sites. I typically find most of these through a Google Scholar search, I will admit, but I just want you to kind of recognize these names more than anything. If you see kind of that Google Scholar PDF link on the side that says Redalyc or Sciello or DialNet, know that those are legitimate sources of content. Most of these are very interesting because they kind of they serve as hosts for some journals and then also kind of aggregate content from other places. So sometimes this will send you off somewhere else for the content, but sometimes the content is actually on this platform. So it's an interesting model how they've mixed kind of repository and journal host together. But these are all places where you may find content, especially in Latin America. For this Sciello, there's kind of collections for all of these different countries here, Spanish-speaking countries, not exclusively Latin America. Okay. I wanted to point out Europe PMC. So if you've done any kind of medical research or helped your patrons with medical research, you may be familiar with PubMed Central, which is the National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health, kind of open repository for life sciences information. And we can actually look at that real quick. So you may be used to seeing PMC. This is where a lot of life sciences related content goes. Things that are funded by the National Institutes of Health have to then be deposited here as part of their public access mandate and made open access within 12 months. There's also this European version which is really interesting to me. It has, yeah, if we go down here, so it kind of gives you this graphic of the differences. So we have PubMed, which is just, you know, the abstract level information from National Library of Medicine, PubMed Central, which gives the full text of a lot of stuff, and then Europe PMC, which contains kind of all the stuff from PubMed. You'll see up in these little circles here. They have the abstracts and the full text, and then they have everything that's in PubMed plus National Health Service guidelines, plus a lot of patents, European patents, these Agricola records, which are from the U.S. National Agricultural Library. So all of this additional content in the European PMC, which I find really interesting. And so I've kind of started coming to the European version on occasion because it has even more content in terms of patents and things like that. So just an interesting thing to note. There's also a PMC Canada. I'm not quite sure what the difference in content there is, but you could check that out as well. So you can find a lot of that kind of medical, health sciences information, life sciences information in Europe PMC or some other version of PMC, including the US version. And you can see it gives you the free full text article, and then of course a lot of it is abstracts as well, but we can click into here. But there are 55,000 OA articles. You can get to the full text, PDF, etc. So it looks very similar, a little prettier than this, I think, but but the layout's very similar in terms of the content of your PMC. Okay, and just double check that there aren't any more questions that have come in. Nope. So the next set of resources I want to talk about are kind of things that you might not generally think about, and that things that might help at the reference desk in addition to ILL requests that kind of relate to media as well. So there's the Flickr Commons, and this is intended to expand access to publicly held photo collections and also kind of allows for crowdsourcing of the metadata for these photos. And each of the photos that you find here is either free of copyright restrictions or covered by a Creative Commons license. So if you have somebody, you know, that's doing a presentation or a kid at school that's, you know, wants to have a picture of Ellis Island for some poster that they're doing, you can look here and you can kind of filter on the copyright restrictions here. So now we have things that it thinks are likely in the public domain, and you could pick out a photo to use with this. Flickr in general too, you can users that are posting their photos now can also assign Creative Commons licenses that allow people to use their work with just attributing to them. So you can also kind of in that setting filter by Creative Commons to see if you can find photos for some sort of project that you're working on that match up. And then you may not think of YouTube as a place to find research material or to fill ILL requests, but I have found that sometimes news segments will get posted on YouTube, and one in particular that I have used YouTube for is we had a user at one point that was asking for a series of Dateline clips. And so I was like, how are we ever going to find this? The only thing I could find in OCLC was a videotape in Australia where they had taped it off the air and had added it to their collection, and they weren't going to send that to me anyway because of copyright and all of that. So I was like, how am I going to find this? And I found the clip that they were looking for on YouTube. So there's all this kind of Dateline stuff. And so I just said, I'm sorry, I can't borrow this for you, but check out this on YouTube. I think this is what you're looking for, and you can take a look there. So for this old Dateline clip. So be creative in thinking about how you can fill your requests. Another thing that we typically have difficulty borrowing through interlibrary loan are music scores. There are a lot of libraries that don't like to lend out that sort of material. And so the International Music Score Library Project, and there are other sites that offer kind of digitized scores as well, but this is a big one where you can this particular one has not only scores but recordings that you can listen to, and you can download the scores that for what people are looking for if you're not able to borrow them directly. And they just use a simple Google site search. So here you can see Clair de Lune is part of the Sweet Virgo Mosque. And there's a bunch of recordings, or I can go down further and get the sheet music, and they have arrangements as well as regular scores, the regular score, etc. So that's a possibility if you have someone looking for a piece of music. And then this is just one that I have fun with. The Library of Congress has a collection called Songs of America that really focuses on Songs of America, obviously, American music and American music history. So you can search not only for pieces of music and recordings, but also performances, composers or artists talking about music and their interpretation of it, other manuscripts, and there's also historic copyright submissions available here. So just kind of interesting stuff if you have someone that's researching American music, and that's just kind of a fun one for me. And those are the sites that I wanted to go over directly. There are so many more, and I kind of maintain my own site on Pinboard. You can see here, it's called ILL Finding Aids, and this link will be in the PowerPoint slides that are going to be posted. And you can see the last time I did this, some people had suggestions of other online scores collections for people, so I added those in, and I've got them tagged by the different types of things. So, you know, if you're looking for a particular piece, particular type of material, you can check out here and see if I have something. This is not only open access resources, but other kind of finding aids, so union catalogs, National Library catalogs, things like that, things that I run across. So you can check that out and see if there's something that is helpful for what you're looking for. And at this point, I think I will stop talking and see if anybody has any questions, or if you have other sites that you like to use that you want to share, I would be happy to hear those as well.
Thank you, Tiana. You just read my mind as you said that. I was just posting a question to ask people to share their favorite open access resources. So we'll give people a few minutes to do that. So thank you so much for that information. You covered so many different resources in a short amount of time. And you know, I think we talked in the past that before I came to Rails, I was at a public library at a reference desk, a busy reference desk, and I wish I had some of these resources in my tool belt, so to speak. So this is really great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Looks like we did get one question. Do you see that there?
Asian Indian sources for ETDs. You know, I don't know if I have. India is a really hard one. I haven't had a lot. I don't think I have a lot in that area. And that's a place where I typically have difficulty. Let's take a look. But I would guess that if there are major universities, let's go back to the beginning of this. This is NDLTD and even and BASE both. We can try both of those. Let's see if there's an easy way to search for the country. Oh yeah, here we go. So, and I'm not going to put any search terms in and see what happens. Google Scholar, yeah, I mean, you can always start with Google Scholar, and if you don't find anything, go from there. So I just searched for theses and dissertations in India. And you could you might expand that regionally and depending on kind of what you're looking for. And I got 18. So it looks like Pondicherry, apologies if I'm saying that wrong, University has an institutional repository, and that might be the other way if you if it's a specific title that you're looking for, you could go directly to that university library's website to see if they have an institutional repository. And I am just very curious as to whether let's see, these are all separate institutions. It's harder to do a country piece in here. And it looks like they would fall into uncoded or languages potentially. So yeah, maybe if you don't find it in Google Scholar, going directly to that university's site would probably be the easiest way. Sorry, I don't have a silver bullet there. Are there other questions? And I know I did go through all of this pretty quickly. The slides that will go up have screenshots of each of these resources that I had as backup. So you'll be able to see those, and they're all listed on my Pinboard site, and that link will be in the slides as well, as I said. So you can kind of go back and look again and play around with some of these things. And as I said, you can always start with Google Scholar. Some of these things get picked up better than others in Google Scholar. There have been a few articles specifically about institutional repositories and how the way the metadata in those is constructed, it doesn't always play well with the way Google does it. So you'll even find some institutional repositories, though they're working to improve that don't all get picked up in Google Scholar. So sometimes you just have to go directly to the source if you think something should exist.
Tina, I mean, we've got a little bit of time. I have a question for you. Do you have any, I apologize if you covered this, but do you have some suggestions for finding things that are in the public domain, not just articles, but like books and things like that, kind of like Hostile Trust and things like that?
So I kind of skipped over some of the things that I think are most commonly used, but let me go ahead and actually this is a good illustration of my point about metadata. So I don't know if I have an example offhand, but so the three big sites, of course, to try and locate public domain books would be Google Books, Internet Archive, and HathiTrust. And I've listed those in order of the quality of the metadata. So Google Books has the worst kind of metadata, and then Internet Archive, and then HathiTrust, which is basically reusing catalog records, has the best. So I have found on occasion, I used to always start with Google Books, and then a few times didn't find it there and thought that it really should be available, so I started kind of working my way up, and there have been times when I have found something in the Internet Archive that it refers me out to where it's digitized in Google Books, but I could not find it in Google Books just because the quality of the description in Google Books is less. So don't always rely on Google Books. Internet Archive is good because anybody can download PDFs from there, so if you're trying to give it to a user, that makes it easy. HathiTrust, while it has the best searching, you can only download the PDFs if you're part of a member institution. So if you're not with a member institution and you don't think that your patron is going to like reading it on the screen, you think they're going to be wanting to have a PDF that they can kind of mark up or even print pieces, print out, then it's probably not the best thing for you to use. So you kind of have to weigh those things in choosing which site you want to go with. But if HathiTrust is the only one that has it and that's the only way to get it, then tell your user to read it online.
Thank you. I just, we had, I think it was last year, we had some genealogy webinars, and the presenter had suggested some of, actually she suggested all 3 resources, because, you know, sometimes, you know, an older publication, a library isn't willing to lend it out for, you know, obvious reasons. So
right.
there's just so much available in these repositories that it's just good to know that it's out there. So.
Yes, that's very true. And yeah, I mean, if you're working with genealogy, there are going to be old family histories in these resources and things like that, yeah, you probably won't be able to borrow. So that's in addition to just general public domain. In terms of genealogy, these are great.
Yeah. All right. Well, I haven't seen any other questions come in. You know, if anyone has questions later, you know, let us know. But thank you so much, Tina, for your presentation today. I found it really helpful and fascinating with how many resources are out there.
Good.
I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much again for asking me to do this today.
Yeah.
And thanks everyone for being here.
Yeah, yes, and thank you to everyone. Tina did give us permission to record today, which we're really grateful. So I'll work on getting that processed, and we'll post it on the Rails website very soon. So I'm going to go ahead, with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you again, Tina, and thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.